Hello everybody, my name is Adam Bergman and I got a really good video for you. In today's video, I want to bring you an interview with Staci Warden. She was just on a panel on Scott Melker's YouTube channel. I'm going to leave a link to the full video down below because I don't want to rob any of his content. She was on a panel with Kathleen Long, who's like a contributor to Wall Street and a huge maxi for Bitcoin. Simon Dixon, who's on the UCC for Celsius. I'm sure you guys seen him around. And they were just talking about the regulations with the Paxos, the Stablecoin, the SEC, Gary Gensler, so on and so forth. It's an absolutely astonishing interview and panel for 1 hour and 15 minutes. I'm gonna show you a 20-minute highlight reel of Staci Warden speaking. Two things before I go any further. Staci Warden did a fantastic job, and this is her third interview in the last 10 days. I see Algorand's marketing, Algorand's public relations, frontline and center with spotlights, eyeballs, and ears. And I'm not sure if this is happening because of Jessica, the new CMO, but I am for sure seeing that there is a shift in Algorand's attitude when it comes to marketing. And I want to bring you these type of videos because usually they don't get enough views from the Algorand community. I'm gonna bring you this video right now. It's a quick 20-minute highlight. It's absolutely ridiculously good. And mind you, marketing, public relations, eyeballs, ears, and getting yourself to the moon is not a sprint. It is a marathon and it takes time. And Algorand literally went from the sidelines holding that cup, giving it to the joggers, to actually being in the race and running alongside. Now, Algorand might not be first, but they are most certainly in the race now. And I am very glad to see what's happening, and it is quite apparent what is happening. I'm gonna go over right now to show you the entire video, 20 minutes. And if you guys want a really cool shirt, Eat, Sleep, Algorand, Repeat, this is my own design, and I have a link to it down below. I also have other memorabilia and other merchandise if you would like. And while you're down there, I do have a link to my Discord, completely 100% free, where we speak about cryptocurrency, we speak about real estate, we speak about stocks, the economy, and side hustles. So if this is something you're interested in, click on the link, it's 100% free. Enjoy the rest of this video and let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Also, if you go to the actual link of the video and you go into the comments, everybody is literally clapping for Staci Warden and asking Scott, bring her on in the future as a panelist because she did a remarkable job. Caitlin, who's a bull of Bitcoin, a maxi for Bitcoin, every time she brought up Bitcoin, Staci's like, Algorand got this, Algorand got that, Algorand already does this. It was absolutely great. You guys are gonna love this video. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Staci, what do you make of this uptick in activity? Uptick is an understatement. Obviously, from your perspective, you're operating here in the United States, a layer 1 protocol, you're working with governments. How much does this change your base case for being able to operate in the United States, or just in general, your thoughts on this massive sort of move against the industry?
Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts in general, but we do not operate in the United States at all. We are a Singapore-based entity. We never issue algo in the United States. We are not at all touching the U.S. Regulatory perimeter. But, you know, Caitlin, I sort of thought this Paxos thing, though, was a bit not going after the stallion, but going after the weakest. You know, if they get rid of USDB or the BINANCE, then then that's what 90% of their revenue. You know, it's not clear to me that Paxos can even survive something like this. And it does seem that there is a targeting maybe of protocols that can't fight back. So I was actually surprised that they went after you because you maybe can fight back, or you're sometimes willing to. And then you also have folks like Sam Bankman-Fried and Gemini talking about how important regulation is and how they're on the side of regulators, being called up on stage with regulators, whispering in the ear of regulators. And, you know, that combined with this industry is like a gnat. You know, it's $1 trillion, just like go away. It's hard to understand. It's hard to, but, I do want to stick up for regulation. Of course, we need good regulation in this industry. And at least, for my part and for, the Algorand Foundation, we very much welcome good regulation. And in 2021, when the Treasury Department said that stablecoins are going to be a priority, I was very excited for that because I don't think the legislation around this is very complicated. You know, you're an unsecured creditor. You need to know that the issuer has the collateral to back up the issuance of the coin, that they are in possession of that collateral. And maybe there's some more nuance around that, in addition to that's needed, but not too much more than that, right? Like, is it backed by the collateral that you say it's backed by? You're kind of done, right? And so I do hope that we can have a legislative effort to be out in front on this. And what I find a little just discouraging about this, Paxos, is just that nobody still knows really what it's about. Like, what authority is the SEC asserting exactly? I mean, it's even more than just regulation by enforcement. It's really, even after the enforcement, even after the Wells notice, I don't think anybody is really sure what the violation exactly was. Now, I think it's more clear for New York DFS, because and I think there's some very interesting kind of precedents that are brought up here, but you were not, you did not have a tailored risk assessment, right? You did not administer in a safe and secure manner. And what they're talking about there is not so much what Paxos did, but what was happening with the coin on Binance, right? So, this is maybe not known to everybody, but the coin is actually issued on Ethereum, right? And then it is wrapped and used in the Binance ecosystem, among other ecosystems. And there is some talk, and of course, I have no idea myself, as to whether there was really a one-to-one correspondence between the Ethereum BUSD and the wrap USD. I don't know, right? But you can imagine New York DFS saying, okay, that's your product. You're responsible for that product, and we don't like the way that you have been in charge of that product. Now, at least that's clear. What I think that also raises are some very interesting questions around, to what extent are you responsible for a product that you issue? BUSD or any kind of stablecoin that Paxos, issues can be used on any protocol. Are they responsible for the behavior of any protocol, for any wrapping of that coin anywhere? It's just a little bit unclear, but at least I think we know where they're coming from. And when they said to stop issuance, Paxos, of course, immediately complied with that, right? And they do have a revenue sharing agreement between them, right? Paxos and Binance. So there is a closeness there. And I thought it was interesting that they did not go after USDP at all. So, it does make you think that there's something going on with Binance that they're interested in, for sure.
Staci, I want to go back to your point about how we're somewhat of a gnat, right? A very small industry, because I actually spoke with Hester Peirce earlier this week, which will come out on Sunday. And that was one of the first questions I asked. I said, just tell me, am I in my own echo chamber here? Do I think that we're more important than we are and we can just easily be dismissed, and that's why all of this is happening? And she actually didn't really think so. She really did, even herself, obviously, believe that these are violations of our freedoms and that this is wrong in every way, shape, or form. I think she's made that very clear. But that was my first thought, was, are we just living in our echo chamber, and are we too small? They don't care, but they're clearly fighting us, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if I take the same degree of kind of warlike stance of this panel, but I think it's just that we're just a little bit more trouble than we merit, and I, of course, am never going to say that these bankruptcies have not had an effect on Main Street, because individual retail investors have lost a lot of money. And we have done a lot of damage as an ecosystem. I mean, the FTX thing is just fraud straight down the middle of the road. It has nothing to do with crypto at all, per se. But we do use, as acting controller Sue says, skeuomorphic words to banking-like words that mean real things in a regulated environment. Like yield means something. Custody means something in a regulated environment. And we, in kind of crypto adjacent, which we crypto hipsters tend to call CeFi, but these crypto adjacent entities use these words not in a regulated manner, and it's confusing, right? And so I'm very sympathetic to regulators trying to get to the bottom of that and trying to police that kind of behavior. But having said that, we have not posed a systemic risk to the U.S. financial system at all. And that's a good and a bad thing, because at the same time, we are showing that we are safe, but at the same time, we're kind of, are we as important? Should their smartest people be working on this full time? Should the most thoughtful people with time be thinking about this as compared to something else, which has maybe more of a bang for its buck in terms of the overall impact on the financial system? And we're $1 trillion industry, right? It's nothing.
You can move a US dollar on the Lightning Network at essentially the speed of light and at essentially zero cost. And that US dollar never touches the banking system. Okay. That is going to disintermediate the banks gradually and then suddenly. And it's just like Uber with the taxi and limousine commissions. At first, the bank regulators are going to fight. They're going to try to block and they're going to try to keep us out. But here's what they're missing. This isn't going away. This is internet native technology. It's code. And anyone with an internet connection can run that code. They will not be able to stop this. And so,
well, Scott, don't think for a second that I'm not going to take the opportunity, given Caitlin's layup, to say that on Algorand, you can do 6,000 transactions per second at a sub-penny fee, final settlement in 3.7 seconds, and the carbon footprint of like 7 houses, right? And so when we think about payments, we think about scale. And when we think about scale, we think about financial inclusion. And what really worries me about the attack on stablecoins, it's not, Binance so much, and it's not Paxos so much, although I do feel for them, of course, some sympathy for them. But what happens here? Does it set a precedent? And is it a precedent that the regulators are actually going to like? Like, is it going to drive more activity to Tether? Is that really the outcome that they actually want, right? And Tether is scrupulous about not operating in the United States, right? Do they want to drive business away from USDC? And, when we do, we have in this country dollar privilege, right? Like, we don't actually need stable coins as much as other countries do. But the stablecoin is a very important on and off ramp into fast payments and good payments globally, right? And so without stable coins, you think about developing countries and emerging markets and their access to the global financial system, which now, if you want to send a remittance, it can take 4 days and somebody takes 6 to 8% off the top, right? And these are these are countries where that is actually a meaningful amount of money. So I just hope that we can not throw the baby out with the bathwater and keep our eye on the prize about what we really want to get done to make this industry as healthy as possible, which I do think the regulators want to do. They just have to, we just need to just think carefully about it and not in a knee-jerk way. To your point, and to my, I guess, earlier point, trying now to figure out exactly what authority the SEC is marshaling, because now, and the talking heads in crypto are kind of trying to figure out, well, maybe it's not the Howey test, maybe it's the Reeves test, right? For promissory notes, or maybe they're treating it as a money market fund, which needs to be, but of course, you don't really make money on a stable coin. So maybe it's a particularly bad kind of money market fund, or like just trying to figure out, where their heads are at, right? Which is, this seems to me, look, I think the regulation of crypto is really a head scratcher, and it has been for 10 years. And I am deeply sympathetic to how disruptive this has been in terms of, the regulatory categories. But this, it seems to me, is not so complicated. Regulatory guidance could have been given. And I think, Caitlin, you mentioned right before we were talking, there were certain aspects of your rejection where regulatory guidance could have been given to you 3 years ago. There's stuff that's not complicated. And it is their duty, I think, to peel off the guidance where they can and acknowledge that some of this stuff is more complicated. And maybe there does need to be a kind of try and, okay, slap a hand if it doesn't work kind of regulatory approach, which, I'm not in favor of, but I do see how that might be necessary in some instances, but not in so many instances as we have now.
180-degree polar opposite approach to what the Clinton administration took. And what it's going to end up doing, unfortunately, is not creating the internet structure like we have today, where the vast majority of those packets go through lit markets and not much goes through Tor. It's going to end up being the opposite. The vast majority is going to go through the dark markets, and virtually nothing will end up, at least with respect to the US, going through the lit markets. It's really a shame. And history will not be kind to the decision makers here. What's also funny is if you look at who the decision makers are, how many of them actually have ever gotten their hands dirty in this technology? It's an interesting question.
Your comments about the Clinton administration. Do you know that one of the big issues back then was, it seems so quaint now, but eBay, right? Yeah. This was going to be commerce online. What was that going to look like? How is this going to be regulated? And as you said, they just took the decision to just let it develop and see what. And and even if you look at M-Pesa in Kenya, The reason that M-Pesa got off the ground in Kenya is because it was regulated by the telco, not by the central bank. And so it gave the industry, it gave it a chance to kind of get going before the central bank even noticed what was going on, actually.
My attitude is, we're going to figure this out. This is just another in the wave of challenges that Bitcoin has had. We have always had the North Star of decentralization in Bitcoin. The UASF.
Scott, they're ganging up on me with this Bitcoin stuff. Now, do you see how this is happening?
I do.
You could have, I'm talking about 3.7 seconds final settlement over here at Algorand. You should give it a try. Decentralized.
But the good news is everybody agrees. They're disagreeing on the method or the platform. So I think that it is good that everybody at least fundamentally agrees on what's important. And I do want to qualify my statements about decentralization. I do think decentralization wins. I was just making the point that I don't think that the regulators stop at centralized. I think they will go after DeFi when finance is involved and yields and people's money. But Caitlin, I want to ask you before we go, do you think that this could get so bad that your average American investor literally cannot get fiat in and out of the crypto market? Like, could they cut off the exchanges to the point where, yes, I can do whatever I want with my Bitcoin, but I can never get it back out to dollars?
That is the question, Scott. That is absolutely the question. And I don't know the answer to that. When I saw the SEC custody rule, I put out a tweet thread last night. This was not aimed at completely shutting off all custody. There are a lot of people who are looking at it that way, but I don't think that's the case at all. What it was aimed at was something, frankly, that wasn't really related to crypto. There was a comment praising the person who worked on the proposal, who'd been working on it for more than a decade. Okay, well, that tells you that crypto was just the trigger to bring a proposal that they'd had in mind for a decade forward. And the proposal had nothing to do with crypto. It has mostly to do with the fact that state chartered trust companies cannot guarantee segregation of assets in bankruptcy. And so that's what the SEC was focused on. They want to make sure that if there's custody, that those assets are segregated properly from the estate of the custodian in the event the custodian goes insolvent. That's a really technical legal issue. It's not anything to do with crypto. Crypto just became the trigger, the proverbial good crisis that couldn't go to waste, so that the SEC could attack state chartered trust companies for this particular bankruptcy reason, which they'd been working on for a decade. And it's no surprise to anyone that happened. Okay, so, but that doesn't cut out all crypto custody. They left, for example, the Wyoming Special Purpose Depository institutions alone. They left the institutions that have special receivership regimes that statutorily enforce the protection, the segregation of customer assets from the estate of the custodian in the event of insolvency. And that's not a bad policy goal, folks. Frankly, if you just take a property rights approach, even a minimalist government approach, that's a basic tenet of custody. You should not be commingling, to use a word Simon used earlier. You should not be commingling your assets with those of your customer, period.
And, since I'm, I guess, the most regulators are trying to do the right thing, pro-regulation person on this panel, maybe I'll just say, by way of agreement with that these things, there are many things that are not that complicated, which we could all use some clean regulatory guidance on. And one of them is what you said, let's not mingle customer, accounts with our trading or with our hedge fund. This is nothing to do with crypto at all. Correct. And I think, where I guess, Scott, I disagree with you a little bit, because I think where regulators will have the most authority and is where the U.S. touches where crypto touches the fiat, right? So maybe DeFi, I think will be in better shape, or I think we both hope that I'm right. But
absolutely,
at the very minimum, if you're going to call something, it has to be that thing. And so, Bitcoin is not calling itself anything. Stablecoins are calling themselves stable. And so if they're going to call themselves stable, they need to be stable, and they need to be pegged the way that they declare. And again, to me, I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't seem that complicated to write legislation and regulation around disclosure that will give unsecured creditors comfort that the peg is really backed up by collateral. And so why not take that approach, I guess, is my final comment.
On that one, I think it's important to cover. I want to agree and disagree with Gary Gensler. I do agree with what Gary Gensler said, that there is regulations that apply. So if you were offering an earn program and offering yield, there are securities laws. If you're rehypothecating, there is banking laws and safeguards around that. If you're doing trading, then there's money transmitter registrations. If you're lending, there's lots of consumer protection and lending registrations if you're not rehypothecating. So all of that does exist. The bit that I completely disagree with is that you can fill in a simple form and you're away. So that was such a misrepresentation of reality.
There are not a lot of public companies that would agree with that. That's true. Yeah.
Right.
Staci, I know you're sitting there. I have to ask you a question, if you're willing. You got to unmute. I'm sorry, I caught you off guard. Hearing all of this, as someone who's obviously a good actor and trying to do right by people, I mean, how's it? It makes me, I'm so embarrassed for the industry by the end of 2022, honestly, that I won't say that my faith was shaken, but I was questioning quite a lot of things. As someone who's trying to do this, how much does this impair your ability moving forward to do what you want to do? And how much of it is just, how do we separate ourselves from all of this nonsense and tell a proper narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think globally, none of this is good for the industry, right? It is not at all. It's not good for anybody. And in particular, it's not good for people like Caitlin that do try to work with regulators very closely. But she is among people that also tried to work with regulators very closely for their own nefarious purposes, right? And so that, and people like Sandra Rowe, who is the head of the Global Blockchain Business Council, who is, devoted her life basically to trying to educate regulators and policymakers on blockchain and on the potential for crypto. It just casts a pall on everything. I will say, though, that looking from a completely parochial point of view, Algorand has never been like the hip, cool 20-somethings on their beanbag chairs, everybody needs to have it and, hyped up and all of that kind of coin or a blockchain. And so we are benefiting, I would say, reputationally from this. People are starting to pay much more attention to us.
Sure.
Oh, you're the ones that are trying to go after real world use cases. You're the ones that are trying to, doing a lot in, disaster relief payments, financial inclusion, things like that. And so we're having everything's relative, but we're having a pretty good moment, I would say, reputationally now. And we got a lot done last year, just kind of keeping our head down and building on the core protocol. So that's what we're going to keep doing. And, as I tell my team, survival is a strategy. And so when we get through this crypto winter, we collectively, the good, I think, will survive. And, it's the Warren Buffett thing, right? We'll see who's been swimming naked as we have, and who's got a nice big, oxygen tank on their back. And so I hope that this is going to be healthful for the ecosystem broadly in the medium term, and that those that remain will be the good players that are trying to do something.
Staci, thank you so much for sticking around and for all of your contributions. And I will say, I do agree with you. I think that regulation is essential. I think everyone agrees with it. Now it's just a matter of defining whether they're going about it in the right manner or not. And so we may obviously disagree to some degree there. And